Welcome back, everyone, to season 4 of the Truth and Freedom podcast, where awakening begins with asking the question most people are afraid to ask. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Amzalag, and this is not just another podcast. This is a journey into awareness, courage, and truth. So, healing didn't used to be something you posted about. It was something you lived through quietly, often painfully, without applause or validation. Somewhere along the way, healing became a trend, something aesthetic, something you announced, something you wear like a badge rather than embody like a discipline. And while awareness has value, we have to be honest about what's happening. Many people are consuming the language of healing without committing to the practice of it. So healing is not information. It's not insight. It's not being able to explain your wounds clearly or name your triggers eloquently. Healing is repetition. It's regulation. It's catching yourself in the same pattern for the 100th time and choosing differently, even when it's uncomfortable and no one is watching. Trend give you permission to feel. Practice asks you to change how you behave. And those two things are not the same. Now, most people today are incredibly self-aware but not self-responsible. They can describe their trauma in detail, but they still react the same way. They can name their attachment style, their nervous system response, their childhood wounds, and then use it as an explanation rather than an invitation to grow. So when healing becomes a trend, language replaces effort, identity replaces discipline, and pain becomes something to protect instead of something to work through. Real healing is often boring. It doesn't look profound. It looks like pausing before reacting, like setting boundaries you don't feel ready for, like staying present when your body wants to escape, like choosing consistency over catharsis. And that kind of work doesn't translate well into quotes or reels. It doesn't get applause. It doesn't make you interesting. It makes you regulated. And regulation is quiet. This is why healing as a trend is so attractive. It offers relief without responsibility. It allows you to feel validated without being challenged. It gives you the language that sounds deep but doesn't require behavioral changes. You can talk about growth while staying the same. You can identify as healing while continuing to avoid discomfort. And avoidance dressed up as self-care is still avoidance. But here's what your body already knows. Healing that isn't practiced doesn't last. Insight without integration fades. Awareness without action becomes frustration. And eventually, all that unprocessed material resurfaces, not as insight, but as anxiety, resentment, burnout, or relational breakdown. You can't think your way into healing. You have to live your way into it. So this is where truth and freedom comes in. Not to shame awareness, but to deepen it. Not to dismiss pain, but to ask what you're doing with it. Healing isn't about becoming softer or harder. It's about becoming steadier. It's about increasing your capacity to stay present with yourself and others without collapsing, controlling, or checking out. And that capacity is built through practice, not performance. Engaged listeners like you understand this difference. You're not here to collect ideas. You're here to build inner strength. You're willing to notice where healing has become an identity instead of a discipline, and where growth has become something you talk about instead of something you embody. That willingness alone puts you ahead of the trend. Practice means showing up when it's inconvenient. It means regulating your nervous system instead of expecting the world to accommodate it. It means taking responsibility for how you impact others, not just how you were impacted yourself. It means choosing honesty over image, integrity over sympathy, and progress over perfection. None of that is glamorous. All of it is freeing. Healing, when practiced, changes your relationships, not because you become more agreeable, but because you become more grounded. You stop seeking validation for your pain and start creating safety through your presence. You stop rehearsing old stories and start responding to what's actually happening now, in the moment. And that's what freedom begins. Not when you feel healed, but when you're no longer ruled by what hurt you. So if you've ever felt delusionized by the noise around healing, culture, let this be your insurance. You're not cynical. You're not discerning. You're sensing the gap between language and lived experience. And that gap is where real work lives. Stay there. Practice there. Choose depth over trend, embodiment over aesthetic, truth over performance. Because healing isn't something you announce. It's something you commit to over and over again in the small moments no one sees. And that commitment, quiet, disciplined, honest, is what leads you to real freedom. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this episode today of Healing Has Become a Trend and Not a Practice. So in our next episode, we will cover the why trauma is real, but so is personal responsibility. So if any of you have dealt with trauma in the past or still dealing with it, you should definitely tune into this episode. Looking forward to hearing your comments or suggestion of past and existing episode. Until then, my friends, stay awake, stay grounded, and stay free.